History remembers the kingdoms that rose, the empires that conquered, and the cities that vanished beneath sand and sea. But what if one kingdom was erased so completely that the only thing left behind was a single map? Not a legend. Not a myth. A map so accurate that every river, every mountain, every village matched reality. Except for one impossible kingdom that no historian had ever heard of. Tonight, we follow the footsteps of one forgotten cartographer whose final map would ignite a mystery that outlived kings, wars, and centuries. Some believe he invented it. Others believe he found something the world was never meant to discover. Close your curtains. Dim the lights. And let's open the oldest map ever drawn. England. Spring. Year 1709. Rain slid across the narrow windows of a stone workshop hidden behind the busy streets of Bristol. Candles flickered against walls covered in maps. Maps of oceans. Maps of colonies. Maps of trade routes. Maps commissioned by kings, merchants, admirals, and explorers. Among them worked a quiet man named Elias Thorne. He was not famous. He was not wealthy. He had never commanded soldiers nor sailed across the Atlantic. Yet captains trusted him more than sailors trusted the stars. Because Elias possessed a strange gift. He almost never made mistakes. If he drew a coastline, ships found it. If he marked a reef, captains avoided disaster. If he estimated a mountain pass, merchants crossed safely. Some whispered he possessed supernatural sight. Others believed he bribed explorers for secret information. Neither explanation was true. Elias simply observed details others ignored. He measured shadows. He compared stories. He collected forgotten journals. He believed every lie contained a fragment of truth. For 30 years this method had never failed. Until the package arrived. It came without a name. No royal seal. No merchant's crest. No address. Only a weathered wooden tube tied with faded blue thread. The delivery boy insisted an old woman had paid him 2 silver coins and disappeared before he could ask questions. Inside rested a single parchment. Not a letter. Not instructions. Only an unfinished map. The paper felt unusually thick. Older than anything Elias had ever handled. Its edges looked burned rather than cut. The ink had faded into soft brown lines. Yet one detail immediately caught his attention. The scale. The measurements. The handwriting. Every symbol matched the standards used by royal surveyors. Except those standards would not be invented for another 50 years. Elias frowned. Impossible. He reached for his collection of official atlases. One after another. France. Spain. Prussia. Ottoman territories. Dutch charts. Nothing matched. The mysterious map showed rivers flowing exactly where real rivers existed. Mountains stood precisely where geology confirmed they should. Forests lined valleys with astonishing accuracy. Even tiny villages appeared exactly where tax records placed them. Everything matched. Everything. Until the center. There stood an enormous kingdom. Larger than Scotland. Filled with roads. Cities. Bridges. Fortresses. Libraries. Canals. Temples. An entire civilization. Its name appeared only once. Aurelia. Elias stared for several minutes. He knew European history. No kingdom called Aurelia had ever existed. Not under another name. Not in forgotten records. Not in Latin. Not in Greek. Nothing. He assumed someone had forged it. But the more he examined the parchment, the stranger everything became. The rivers flowing into Aurelia continued naturally beyond its borders. Trade roads connected perfectly with neighboring regions. Distances matched real geography. Nothing appeared imaginary. Only. History itself refused to acknowledge the kingdom. Curiosity replaced skepticism. He carried the map to Professor Edmund Hale, Bristol's oldest historian. The professor laughed immediately. Beautiful forgery. Elias asked why. The kingdom. It never existed. But the roads? Copied. The rivers? Copied. The villages? Copied. The cities? Invented. Simple enough. Or so it seemed. Elias requested something unusual. If they're invented, tell me where the mistakes are. Professor Hale examined the parchment again. Minutes passed. His smile faded. He searched larger atlases. Then Roman records. Then monastery archives. Finally he whispered. There are no mistakes. Silence filled the room. Every surrounding landmark matched official records with impossible precision. Whoever created the map understood geography better than Britain's finest surveyors. But why invent only one kingdom? Professor Hale dismissed the thought. A practical joke. Yet before Elias left, the old historian said something that would haunt both men forever. I've seen that handwriting before. Elias stopped. Where? The professor slowly unlocked an ancient cabinet. Inside lay dozens of manuscripts collected over 50 years. He searched carefully before removing a tiny notebook wrapped in faded cloth. The notebook belonged to a monk. Date unknown. Author unknown. Inside appeared only 6 pages. 5 were blank. On the 6th, the same handwriting. Exactly the same. Neat. Precise. Patient. But instead of a map, the monk had copied a single sentence. Asterisk, a kingdom disappears only after its last witness forgets its name. Asterisk. Neither man spoke. Professor Hale turned pale. I found this 22 years ago inside the ruins of an abandoned monastery. There was nothing else. Nothing. No author. No. No date. No. The historian looked toward the unfinished map again. Then quietly closed the notebook. I believe you should burn both. Elias blinked. Why? The professor hesitated. When I first found this notebook, someone tried to steal it the very next night. You told no one. I know. The thief never took anything else. Only searched for this. Who was he? I never saw his face. The room suddenly felt colder. Outside, church bells rang 6 times. Rain continued against the windows. Neither man noticed another figure standing across the street. Watching. Waiting. Holding an umbrella that never moved. The stranger remained there until Elias left carrying the mysterious map beneath his coat. Then, without speaking to anyone, the man quietly followed him through the narrow streets of Bristol. Elias never looked back. So he never realized. The hunt had already begun. The streets of Bristol emptied quickly after sunset. A cold mist rolled in from the harbor, swallowing lantern light one street at a time. Elias Thorne walked at his usual pace, unaware that someone remained only a few hundred feet behind him. The stranger never hurried. Never slowed. And somehow, despite the wet cobblestones, no sound of footsteps ever echoed through the narrow streets. Elias reached his workshop shortly before nightfall. The first thing he did was lock every door. The second was spread the mysterious map across his largest drafting table. For hours he measured every line. Every angle. Every river. Every hill. The mathematics fascinated him. Nothing had been drawn by guesswork. Every distance followed a hidden geometric system unlike any European mapping technique. It was almost perfect. Then he noticed something no one else had. Near the lower edge of the parchment, beside an ordinary-looking river, sat a tiny circle no larger than the head of a pin. At first he believed it was an ink stain. But under a polished crystal lens, the mark revealed itself. It wasn't a stain. It was a symbol. A tiny eye. Inside the eye rested a six-pointed compass. Elias searched through dozens of old cartographic references. Nothing matched. No guild. No kingdom. No explorer. No empire. The symbol belonged to no known civilization. He carefully copied it into his notebook. The moment his pen completed the final line, a loud knock shook the workshop door. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. Elias froze. No visitor ever came this late. Another 3 knocks. He approached cautiously. Who's there? No answer. He lifted the iron latch and opened the door. No one. Only rain. The empty street stretched in both directions. Then he noticed something resting on the doorstep. A leather pouch. Inside lay a single silver coin. The coin felt unusually heavy. One side displayed no king. No date. Only the same tiny eye symbol. The other side showed a tree whose roots formed the shape of a crown. Elias had never seen such currency. He turned toward the street again. Still empty. Yet the strange feeling of being watched refused to leave. The next morning he visited Bristol's busiest market. If anyone recognized the coin, it would be the merchants. An elderly goldsmith examined it carefully. I've never seen this metal. It's silver. No. It looks like silver. But it isn't. He scratched the edge against a testing stone. No mark appeared. He tried acid. Nothing happened. He weighed it 3 times. Each measurement differed. Impossible. The old man slowly handed it back. I cannot tell you what this is. But I can tell you something else. What? You shouldn't carry it. Why? The goldsmith leaned closer. My grandfather once described a coin exactly like this. When? Nearly 70 years ago. What did he say? He said a traveler paid him with one. And? The traveler vanished before sunrise. Vanished? As if he had never existed. Elias thanked him and left. Behind him, the old goldsmith quietly closed his shop. Hours before anyone else. That afternoon Elias decided to compare the mysterious map with Roman military records stored inside the city archive. Most historians searched only the written texts. Elias preferred overlooked details. Margins. Corrections. Scratches. Tiny mistakes made by tired scribes. After several hours, he discovered something extraordinary. One Roman map contained a strange gap. Not an error. A deliberate omission. Every surrounding region had names. Only one large section remained blank. No rivers labeled. No settlements. Nothing. Almost as if someone had intentionally erased an entire country. At the bottom of the page, nearly invisible beneath faded ink, another sentence appeared. Written centuries after the original map. Asterisk, leave this place unnamed. Asterisk. No signature. No explanation. Just 5 words. That evening he returned home carrying copies of everything. As he unlocked his workshop, he stopped. The door was already open. Only slightly. Just enough for darkness to stare back at him. Every instinct warned him to leave. Instead, curiosity won. He stepped inside. Nothing seemed disturbed. His books remained on their shelves. His measuring tools sat exactly where he had left them. The mysterious map still rested upon the table. He exhaled. Perhaps he had forgotten to lock the door. Then he noticed the candle. He had extinguished it before leaving. Now it burned quietly. Fresh wax dripped onto the table. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. Elias reached beneath his coat and drew the small pistol he kept for emergencies. Slowly he searched every room. Storage closet. Kitchen. Bedroom. Attic. Nothing. No intruder. No missing possessions. Until he returned to the map. Something had changed. A line of fresh ink now crossed the lower corner. It hadn't been there before. Someone had added a single sentence. The handwriting matched the mysterious notebook perfectly. Asterisk, maps remember what people choose to forget. Asterisk. The ink was still wet. Whoever wrote it had left only moments earlier. For the first time in 30 years. Elias felt genuine fear. Not because someone had entered his locked workshop. But because they had touched nothing else. Not the expensive instruments. Not the rare books. Not the silver hidden beneath the floorboards. Only the map. As if everything else in the room were completely meaningless. Unable to sleep, Elias placed a chair beside the front window and watched the empty street through the night. The hours crawled by. Midnight. 1 o'clock. 2. Rain finally stopped. A pale moon emerged behind drifting clouds. Then. Movement. A lone figure crossed the street. The same tall man carrying the black umbrella. Except there was no rain anymore. He stopped directly beneath the street lamp. Slowly raised his head. Even from across the street, Elias could not see his face. It remained hidden beneath impossible darkness. The stranger removed one white glove. Raised a single finger. Not pointing at Elias. Not pointing at the workshop. Pointing toward the north. Toward the place where the impossible kingdom of Aurelia should have existed. Then, without turning around, the stranger walked into the morning fog. Elias rushed outside only seconds later. The street was empty. No footsteps. No tracks in the mud. Nothing. Only one object remained where the stranger had stood. A small brass compass. Its needle did not point north. It pointed steadily. Toward the missing kingdom. And no matter how Elias turned the compass, the needle refused to move. He stared into the silent dawn, gripping the impossible instrument. For the first time, he stopped asking whether Aurelia had ever existed. Instead, a far more dangerous question entered his mind. What if it still did? Morning arrived with clear skies. Yet the brass compass in Elias Thorne's hand behaved as though the laws of nature had quietly changed overnight. He laid it beside 3 ordinary navigation compasses. All 3 pointed north. The brass compass pointed somewhere else. Always. No matter where he carried it. No matter how many times he rotated it. Even when he placed it inside a wooden box. Wrapped it in cloth. Or carried it beneath his coat. The needle remained unwavering. It pointed toward the forgotten kingdom marked on the mysterious map. Toward Aurelia. Elias trusted evidence more than instinct. He marked the needle's direction on paper every hour for 3 days. Not once did it shift. He calculated the angle against the stars. Compared it with the Earth's magnetic variation. The numbers made no sense. If the compass were telling the truth, it pointed toward a place that official geography insisted did not exist. Yet mathematics rarely lied. People did. On the 4th morning, Elias made a decision that would change the rest of his life. He would follow the compass. Not because he believed in legends. but because he believed every impossible claim deserved one honest investigation. He packed lightly. A telescope. Drawing instruments. Ink. Blank journals. Food for 3 weeks. His father's brass ruler. And, folded carefully inside a leather case, the mysterious map. Before leaving Bristol, he wrote a letter to Professor Edmund Hale. If anything happened, someone deserved to know why. He sealed the envelope and instructed a young messenger to deliver it only if he failed to return within 1 month. As he mounted his horse and rode north, he never noticed the same messenger quietly unfolding the letter after Elias disappeared around the bend. The boy smiled. Then placed the unopened letter into his own satchel. It would never reach Professor Hale. The journey led through villages forgotten by merchants and roads abandoned by soldiers. Every evening, Elias questioned local farmers. Every answer sounded strangely familiar. Have you heard of Aurelia? They laughed. No. An old kingdom? No. A ruined city? No. Yet every conversation ended the same way. Each person paused for a brief moment, as though trying to remember something just beyond reach. Then they shook their heads. It's an odd name, they would say. I feel like I should know it. But I don't. That unsettled Elias more than outright denial. It was as if the name lingered in people's minds, like the final seconds of a forgotten dream. 1 week into the journey, the compass led him toward an isolated valley. No roads appeared on any official map. Dense forests swallowed the hills. Ancient oaks blocked much of the sunlight. Birdsong gradually disappeared. Even the wind seemed quieter. His horse grew nervous. It snorted repeatedly. Refused to move. Animals often sense danger before humans. Elias dismounted and continued on foot. After another mile, he found the first impossible clue. A stone milestone. Half buried beneath moss. Roman milestones usually recorded distances to nearby cities. This one did as well. Except one destination had been chiseled away with extraordinary care. Not broken. Removed. Someone had spent hours erasing only a single word. The distance remained. 22 miles. But the city itself had been erased from history. Nearby, another discovery waited. An abandoned bridge crossed a narrow river. Unlike ordinary bridges, its stones showed almost no signs of weathering. The structure looked centuries younger than it should have. In the center lay a bronze plaque. Its inscription had been scratched away. Only one sentence remained untouched. Every road remembers its first destination. Elias copied the words into his journal. As he finished writing, he heard footsteps behind him. Real footsteps this time. Slow. Measured. He turned. An elderly woman stood at the far end of the bridge. She wore simple gray clothing and carried a basket filled with herbs. Her face showed countless wrinkles, but her eyes appeared remarkably young. "You've come a long way," she said. Elias nodded. "I've been following a compass." She smiled sadly. "No. You've been following a memory." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, she looked toward the leather case beneath his arm. "You opened the map." "Yes. You shouldn't have." "Why?" "Because maps choose readers more carefully than readers choose maps." The words sounded absurd. Yet she spoke them with complete certainty. Elias stepped closer. "Who are you?" "I've had many names." "Were you expecting me?" She ignored the question. Instead, she reached into her basket and removed a small apple. Its skin carried faint golden streaks unlike any fruit Elias had ever seen. "Eat. I'm not hungry." "You will be." "I'd rather have answers." She sighed. Everyone says that. And they almost always regret getting them. Before Elias could speak again, the old woman looked directly into his eyes. What year is it? He frowned. 1709. She remained silent. Then whispered almost to herself. So much time. What do you mean? She asked another question. Who is your king? He answered. Her expression grew stranger. As I feared. You speak as though you've been gone for centuries. I have. A cold breeze crossed the bridge. The woman's hair moved gently. Everything else remained perfectly still. Leaves. Grass. Branches. Nothing moved. Only her silver hair. She handed Elias the apple. You'll need your strength. For what? Crossing. Crossing where? She slowly raised one trembling hand. Pointing beyond the forest. Beyond the hills. Toward a thick wall of white mist stretching across the valley. Elias had somehow failed to notice it before. It wasn't ordinary fog. It formed a perfect line from one mountain to the other. Like a gigantic curtain. There are no roads on my map, Elias said. There aren't supposed to be. Then how do I reach the other side? You don't. But the compass dash. The compass only brings people here. It never takes them back. For several long seconds, neither spoke. Finally Elias asked the question that had haunted him since Bristol. Is Aurelia real? The old woman's eyes filled with something between sorrow and relief. You are the first person in 87 years to ask me that. She turned toward the white mist. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. It was real. Then she looked back at him. And unless the world has forgotten more than I fear, it still is. The compass in Elias's hand suddenly began to vibrate. Not violently. Just enough for the brass to hum with a deep metallic tone. The sound echoed through the silent valley. From somewhere beyond the white mist. Another tone answered. Low. Ancient. Patient. As if something on the other side had been waiting a very long time. For someone to finally come looking. The sound beyond the white mist lasted only a few seconds. Then silence returned. Not ordinary silence. The kind that seemed to absorb every other sound. Even Elias's breathing felt strangely distant. The brass compass had stopped vibrating. Its needle now stood perfectly still, aimed directly at the towering wall of mist. The old woman closed her eyes. They heard you. Elias looked at her. Who? The Watchers. Soldiers. No. Then who are they? They remember. Remember what? She opened her eyes slowly. Everything. Without another word, she turned and began walking toward the mist. Her pace was slow, almost effortless. Elias followed. The closer they came, the stranger the air became. The temperature dropped sharply. The scent of pine vanished. Even sunlight seemed weaker, as if the white curtain swallowed its warmth. When they stood only a few feet away, Elias reached out to touch the mist. His fingers stopped. Not because of fear. Because he could hear something. Voices. Thousands of them. Not loud. Barely whispers. Layer upon layer. Children laughing. Merchants bargaining. Church bells. Horse hooves. Women singing. Soldiers shouting commands. It sounded like an entire city living its ordinary life. Hidden just beyond the veil. Elias pulled his hand back. What is this? The old woman answered without looking at him. Memory. She stepped forward. Instead of striking her face, the mist flowed around her like water. She disappeared. Only her voice remained. You may enter. But once you see the truth, you will never again belong entirely to the world you came from. Elias stood alone. Every sensible instinct demanded he turn around. Return to Bristol. Forget the impossible map. Forget Aurelia. Forget all of it. Instead, he took one step forward. Then another. The mist surrounded him. Cold. Weightless. Silent. For a moment he saw nothing. Then the world changed. Sunlight exploded around him. Warm. Golden. The sky above shone an impossible shade of blue. The air smelled of fresh bread and flowering trees. He blinked several times. The mist was gone. He stood atop a grassy hill overlooking the largest city he had ever seen. Stone towers stretched toward the heavens. Wide canals reflected the afternoon sun. Massive libraries stood beside elegant gardens. Markets overflowed with colorful fabrics. Ships sailed along a river lined with marble docks. Thousands of people walked the streets below. Children chased each other through open squares. Musicians played unfamiliar instruments. Blacksmiths worked in open workshops. Nothing appeared ruined. Nothing abandoned. Everything was alive. Perfectly alive. Yet according to every history book ever written, none of it should have existed. Elias stared in disbelief. This. The old woman smiled faintly. Is Aurelia. He whispered the name. The city bells rang at that exact moment. Not one bell. Hundreds. As though the city itself had heard him. People below stopped walking. Heads slowly turned. Thousands of faces looked toward the hill. Toward Elias. A strange expression crossed every face. Not anger. Not surprise. Recognition. As if they had been expecting him. A group of riders soon climbed the hill. Their horses wore polished bronze armor unlike anything in Europe. Their uniforms bore the same eye symbol Elias had seen on the map and coin. The captain dismounted. He removed his helmet. His face looked no older than 30. Yet his eyes carried an exhaustion that belonged to someone who had lived several lifetimes. He bowed respectfully. You have finally arrived. You know who I am. No. Then why were you waiting? Because every generation sends one. Every generation. The captain nodded. The cartographer. Elias frowned. I am no one special. Neither were the others. What others? Instead of answering, the captain extended his hand. You should meet the keeper. They entered the city through enormous bronze gates. No guards questioned Elias. No citizen stared. Life continued as though a stranger arriving from another world happened every day. Yet one detail disturbed him. No one looked old. There were children. Young adults. Middle-aged craftsmen. But almost no elderly people. He quietly asked the captain. Where are your old people? The captain's smile disappeared. They remember too much. What does that mean? You'll understand. Hours later they reached the heart of Aurelia. There stood a circular building unlike any cathedral, palace, or library Elias had ever imagined. Its walls were covered with millions of tiny engraved names. Thousands upon thousands. Every stone. Every column. Every arch. One enormous record of human memory. Above the entrance appeared a single sentence. Asterisk, nothing truly dies while it is remembered. Asterisk. The captain stopped. The keeper is inside. The building contained no books. No shelves. No paintings. Only an endless circular chamber filled with candles. At its center sat a single man. White hair. White robes. eyes closed. He looked ancient. Older than anyone Elias had ever seen. The captain bowed deeply before leaving. Elias approached. The old man spoke before opening his eyes. You took longer than the last one. You were expecting me. I've expected you for 312 years. Elias felt a chill. That isn't possible. The old man smiled gently. No. It shouldn't be. Finally, he opened his eyes. They were clear. Bright. Almost youthful. I am the keeper of names. Elias Thorne. The cartographer stiffened. I never told you my name. You didn't need to. The keeper slowly rose to his feet. Despite his appearance, he stood perfectly straight. No one enters Aurelia by accident. He walked toward one of the walls covered in names. There. Elias looked where he pointed. Among thousands of engravings. He found it. Elias Thorne. Already carved into the stone. The letters were old. Covered with centuries of wear. His knees weakened. How? I only arrived today. The keeper touched the ancient carving. You arrived today. He looked directly into Elias's eyes. But your name has been waiting here. For over 400 years. Elias could no longer tell whether he was uncovering history. Or walking into a destiny someone else had written long before he was born. And somewhere deep beneath the city. A massive bronze bell rang once. The keeper's calm expression vanished for the first time. He whispered only 3 words. They found us. The deep bronze bell echoed through Aurelia like distant thunder. Once. Only once. Yet every conversation in the streets stopped instantly. Market stalls fell silent. Blacksmiths lowered their hammers. Children froze in place. Even the birds circling above the rooftops disappeared into the sky without a sound. Elias looked toward the keeper. What does that bell mean? The old man's face had lost all color. It has not rung in 143 years. Who rang it? The keeper answered with a question of his own. Do you remember the man who followed you through Bristol? Elias nodded. The man with the umbrella. The man whose footsteps made no sound. The keeper closed his eyes. They have crossed the boundary. The enormous doors of the Hall of Names burst open. The captain rushed inside. His polished armor was stained with dust. They've entered the eastern quarter. So soon? Asked the keeper. They came through the silent gate. How many? We counted 9. The keeper's expression darkened. 9 is enough. Elias stepped forward. I don't understand. The captain turned toward him. You believe you came here searching for Aurelia? Yes. In truth. They were following you. Before Elias could respond, another bell sounded. Closer this time. Then another. Soon the entire city echoed with a slow, solemn rhythm. Not a call to battle. A warning. Citizens moved calmly but quickly. Windows were shuttered. Market goods disappeared within minutes. Children were led indoors. No panic. Only practiced precision. As though everyone had rehearsed this countless times before. The keeper led Elias through a narrow staircase beneath the Hall of Names. The deeper they descended, the colder the air became. At the bottom waited a vast underground chamber. Its ceiling disappeared into darkness. Thousands of candles illuminated row after row of stone statues. Each statue portrayed an ordinary person. A baker. A soldier. A teacher. A fisherman. None wore crowns. None carried weapons. Each held a single object close to the chest. A book. A key. A flower. A toy. A compass. Elias counted hundreds. Then thousands. What is this place? The keeper answered softly. The archive of the remembered. They're beautiful. They were. They were once alive. Elias approached the nearest statue. The craftsmanship was astonishing. Every wrinkle. Every strand of hair. Every fold of clothing looked real. Too real. He reached out to touch the stone hand. The keeper stopped him. Don't. Why? Because it isn't entirely stone. A chill ran through Elias. What do you mean? The keeper walked beside one statue depicting a smiling young woman holding a violin. Her name was Lisa. She composed music that could calm an angry crowd. What happened to her? No one outside Aurelia remembered her. So she began to disappear. Elias frowned. Disappear. Not die. Disappear. Her memories faded. Her voice vanished. Her face became impossible to recognize. Eventually. Only we remembered her. The keeper gently touched the statue's shoulder. When the last memory of someone leaves the world, we preserve what remains. Elias stared at the endless rows of figures. You're telling me people here become stone? No. They become forgotten. The stone merely gives memory a place to survive. The explanation sounded impossible. Yet every impossible thing he had witnessed since finding the map had eventually revealed a hidden logic. Perhaps memory itself obeyed laws no scholar had ever studied. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. One candle went out. Then another. Then dozens. The captain looked upward. They're close. The keeper nodded grimly. We have little time. He led Elias into a smaller circular room hidden behind an iron door. Unlike the hall above, this chamber contained only one object. A massive table carved from black oak. Spread across its surface lay hundreds of maps. Some were complete. Others unfinished. Some showed continents unlike any Elias had ever seen. Others depicted cities that had vanished from history centuries earlier. At the center rested a map still blank except for faint guidelines. The keeper placed a trembling hand upon it. This one belongs to you. Elias stepped back. My map? Not yet. But it will. I don't understand. You think your profession is drawing places. It isn't. You draw memory. The keeper removed an ancient leather journal from beneath the table. Its pages had yellowed with age. The cover bore the same eye symbol. He opened it. Inside were portraits. One after another. Each showed a different cartographer. Men. Women. Young. Old. Different centuries. Different clothing. Different cultures. Yet each portrait shared one remarkable feature. Every one of them carried the same brass compass Elias now possessed. He turned another page. Another. Another. The final portrait had no face. Only a blank outline. Beneath it appeared a single name. Elias Thorne. Left unfinished. Waiting. What is this? Elias whispered. The line of cartographers. How many? 47 before you. And what happened to them? The keeper remained silent for a long moment. Finally he answered. They all completed the map. And then? They chose. Chose what? The old man looked directly into Elias's eyes. To return to the world. Or remain here forever. Another tremor. This one stronger. Somewhere above. People screamed. For the first time since entering Aurelia. Fear reached the city. The captain drew his sword. The eastern wall has fallen. Elias looked toward the keeper. Who's attacking us? The keeper walked to the only window in the chamber. It overlooked the eastern gate. Black figures moved through the streets. They wore long gray coats, wide-brimmed hats, featureless white masks. Each carried no weapon. Only a lantern burning with a pale blue flame. The same umbrella man stood at their front. Still carrying the closed black umbrella. Still leaving no footprints. They don't kill, the keeper said quietly. They erase. Elias watched one masked figure stop before a frightened merchant. The figure simply raised the lantern. Blue light washed across the merchant's face. The man blinked once. Twice. Then calmly turned away. He looked around the street with confusion. As though he had forgotten why he was there. Then he began walking. Not toward safety. Not toward home. He simply wandered. Aimlessly. His wife ran after him, crying. He looked at her with empty eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "Have we met?" She collapsed in tears. The masked figure continued walking. Never looking back. Elias felt his blood run cold. "What are they?" The keeper answered in a voice barely above a whisper. "They are called the unremembered. And every forgotten civilization eventually creates them." The umbrella man slowly turned his head toward the Hall of Names. Then, for the first time, he looked directly at Elias. Even across the vast distance, Elias felt certain of one terrifying truth. The stranger had not come to destroy Aurelia. He had come for the last cartographer. The masked man stood motionless in the center of Aurelia's eastern avenue. Around him, the unremembered drifted silently through the city. No swords. No arrows. No fire. Wherever the pale blue lanterns passed, names vanished. Shopkeepers forgot their own customers. Neighbors forgot each other's faces. A child cried because she could no longer remember her mother's voice. An old musician stared at the instrument in his hands as if seeing it for the first time. Nothing was destroyed. Yet something far worse was happening. Memory itself was being stolen. Elias gripped the edge of the window. "They're not attacking the city." The keeper nodded. "They're attacking its existence." Outside, the captain barked orders. Large bronze mirrors were carried into the streets. Citizens lifted them toward the approaching figures. When the pale blue light struck the polished surfaces, it scattered in every direction. Several masked strangers stopped walking. Their lanterns dimmed. One by one, they stepped backward. Elias looked at the keeper. The mirrors. They don't reflect faces. They reflect memory. I don't understand. Neither do they. The keeper allowed himself the faintest smile. The unremembered cannot steal what they are forced to witness. The smile vanished almost immediately. The umbrella man never slowed. He ignored every mirror. Every lantern reflected around him bent strangely, as though light itself avoided his shadow. The blue flames grew brighter as he approached. "He is different," Elias whispered. "Yes. He remembers." The keeper motioned for Elias to follow him. They climbed another spiral staircase that led to the highest chamber of the Hall of Names. Unlike the rooms below, this one had no walls. Only enormous windows overlooking every corner of Aurelia. At its center stood a single stone pedestal. Upon it rested an object wrapped in faded linen. The keeper carefully removed the cloth. Elias stared. It was a map. Or rather, what remained of one. The parchment had almost completely faded. Only faint silver lines still shimmered beneath the candlelight. "This," said the keeper softly, "is the first map. The first? The one that created Aurelia. Elias frowned. A map created a kingdom? The keeper shook his head. No. The kingdom created the map. But after history abandoned us, the map became all that remained. He carefully unfolded another section. As more of the silver lines appeared, Elias noticed something extraordinary. The streets of Aurelia shifted outside the windows. A fountain moved. A bridge lengthened. A garden changed shape. The city itself was responding to the ancient map. Every line drawn upon the parchment reshaped reality. Elias stepped back in disbelief. This is impossible. No, the keeper replied. It is simply forgotten knowledge. He placed a weathered finger upon the faded ink. Every civilization believes that stone builds cities. They are mistaken. What builds them? Shared memory. As long as people remember a place, it continues. When the memory dies, so does the world. Another tremor shook the tower. Far below, one of Aurelia's great bronze gates collapsed. The captain's voice echoed from the streets. They've reached the hull. The keeper turned to Elias. There is no more time. From a locked chest beneath the pedestal, he withdrew a leather case. Elias recognized it instantly. It matched his own. Inside lay another brass compass. Older. Darker. Its needle no longer moved. This belonged to the 47th cartographer. What happened to him? He failed. The keeper handed Elias the silent compass. Its metal felt strangely warm. He reached Aurelia. He began the new map. But when the choice came, he hesitated. And the keeper closed the case. Hesitation is enough. For what? For memory to disappear. The distant sound of footsteps echoed through the tower. Slow. Measured. No hurry. The umbrella man had entered the hall of names. The keeper remained calm. He is coming here. Who is he? For the first time. The old man hesitated. Then he answered. He was once a cartographer. Elias felt the room spin. What? The first cartographer? The one who drew the original map? Yes. But that's impossible. He should have died centuries ago. He did. Silence. Only the slow footsteps continued climbing. One floor below. Then another. The keeper continued. When Aurelia was forgotten by the outside world, he refused to let it end. So he sacrificed his own name. What does that mean? He erased himself from every memory. Every record. Every book. Every language. So the kingdom could survive. Elias struggled to understand. If no one remembers him, then who is he now? The keeper looked toward the staircase. A man with no name. A man history cannot hold. A man who exists only between memory and oblivion. The footsteps stopped outside the chamber. A gentle knock. 3 slow taps. Exactly the same pattern Elias had heard on the rainy night in Bristol. The wooden door swung open by itself. The umbrella man entered. His long gray coat showed no dust despite the ruined streets below. His white mask reflected no light. In one hand he carried the black umbrella. In the other, the pale blue lantern. He removed neither. He simply looked at Elias. Then, in a calm voice that sounded older than the city itself, he spoke. Welcome home. My successor. The keeper lowered his head. Not in fear. In sorrow. Elias's heart pounded. My successor. The masked man nodded once. You think you came here to discover Aurelia? A long silence followed. Then he spoke the words that shattered everything Elias believed. "No, Elias Thorne. You were born so that I could finally leave." The tower fell silent. Even the distant bells had stopped ringing. Only the pale blue flame inside the stranger's lantern continued to sway, though no wind touched it. Elias stared at the masked figure. "You've been waiting for me." The stranger inclined his head. "For far longer than you can imagine." The keeper stepped between them. "You promised you would never enter this chamber." "I did. And yet here you stand." "I had no choice." The keeper's voice hardened. "There is always a choice." The masked man remained perfectly calm. "There was. But that choice ended 4 centuries ago." Elias could no longer remain silent. "Take off your mask." "No. I want to see your face." "You cannot." "Why?" "Because your mind would try to remember it. And it would fail." "What happens then?" The stranger answered without emotion. "You would forget your own." The words lingered in the room. Impossible. Terrifying. Yet after everything Elias had witnessed, he no longer dismissed impossible things. The stranger slowly placed the lantern upon the stone floor. The pale blue flame immediately grew brighter. Inside its light, images began to appear. Not reflections. Memories. Elias watched an enormous city being built. Thousands of workers shaping marble. Children planting trees. Scholars filling libraries. Engineers carving canals. Musicians performing beneath open skies. Aurelia in its first golden age. The vision changed. Foreign merchants arrived from distant kingdoms. Maps of Aurelia spread across continents. Its name appeared in royal courts. Universities copied its discoveries. For centuries, the city became one of the greatest centers of learning the world had ever known. Then the image darkened. War. Not a war of armies. A war of ideas. Kings feared knowledge they could not control. Empires feared a city that belonged to no empire. Instead of invading Aurelia, they erased it. Libraries removed its name. Monks rewrote chronicles. Maps were redrawn. Teachers stopped speaking of it. Generation after generation, silence replaced memory. Until eventually, the world no longer knew Aurelia had ever existed. The city was not conquered. It was forgotten. The vision faded. Elias whispered. "They erased history." "No," replied the masked man. "They edited it." The keeper sighed deeply. "And you answered by abandoning your own name." The masked man remained silent. At last he spoke. "I believed one forgotten life was a fair price to save an entire civilization." "Were you wrong?" The question hung heavily between them. For the first time, the masked man did not answer immediately. "I no longer know." He slowly walked toward one of the windows overlooking the city. Below, citizens hurried through the streets carrying books, paintings, family portraits, children's toys. Anything that preserved memory. Anything that reminded them who they were. "They have survived because of my sacrifice." He paused. "But they have also become prisoners of it." Elias stepped beside him. "If Aurelia still exists, why can't the world simply know about it again?" The masked man smiled beneath the white mask. "You think memory is simple. It isn't. The world forgot us naturally. Trying to force remembrance would break something far older than kingdoms." He reached into his coat. From an inner pocket, he removed a folded sheet of parchment. Elias recognized it instantly. It was the missing half of the mysterious map. The torn edges matched perfectly. For centuries, The map had never been incomplete by accident. It had been separated intentionally. The stranger handed it to Elias. "It belongs to you." As Elias joined both halves together, the silver lines across the parchment began glowing. Not brightly. Softly. Like moonlight reflected on water. New roads slowly appeared. New rivers. New mountains. Places that had never existed upon either half alone. Then, words began writing themselves across the page. No hand held a pen. The ink simply flowed. One sentence. Asterisk, every map is a promise between memory and time. Asterisk. The room trembled violently. Outside. The sky darkened. Clouds spiraled above Aurelia. The brass compass hanging from Elias's belt began spinning wildly for the first time. The keeper's face filled with alarm. "It has begun." "What has?" "The choosing." The stranger turned toward Elias. "There have always been 48 cartographers. The number never changes." "I don't understand." "You will." He removed one glove. For the first time, Elias saw the stranger's hand. It wasn't old. It wasn't young. It wasn't even entirely human. His skin shimmered like faded parchment. Thin silver lines covered it. The same lines that appeared on ancient maps. Roads. Rivers. Borders. Entire landscapes seemed etched beneath translucent skin. Every movement shifted them slightly. As though geography itself flowed through his veins. "I have carried the map for 412 years." His voice remained calm. "But no map lasts forever. It must be rewritten." "By whom?" "You." The keeper stepped forward immediately. "No. He has not yet learned. He is not ready." The masked man nodded. "No cartographer ever is." Suddenly, the lantern's blue flame flared violently. Every window in the tower shattered. Glass exploded outward into the storm. From every corner of Aurelia came the same horrifying sound. People screaming names. Their own names. The names of loved ones. The names of streets. Of rivers. Of homes. As if desperately trying to keep them alive. The keeper closed his eyes. "They're forgetting." Elias looked down. Entire buildings had begun fading around the edges. Not collapsing. Simply becoming transparent. A bridge slowly vanished into the river. Trees dissolved into drifting white dust. A school disappeared while children still stood inside it. The children remained. The building did not. History itself was unraveling. The stranger looked toward Elias one final time. There is no more time to search for answers. He gently placed the first map into Elias's hands. "It is your turn. To decide what the world deserves to remember." The first map felt impossibly light in Elias's hands. It should have weighed almost nothing. Yet lifting it felt like carrying an entire civilization. The silver lines continued to glow softly. One by one. Tiny points of light appeared across the parchment. Each light pulsed like a heartbeat. Elias frowned. "What are these?" The keeper answered quietly. "They are lives. Every light. Every person who is still remembered." As they watched, one of the lights disappeared. Then another. Then 5 more. Each vanished without a sound. At that exact moment, a house outside dissolved into white dust. A bridge lost an entire arch. A tree that had stood for centuries simply ceased to exist. Not because it had been destroyed. Because history no longer had a place for it. Elias looked toward the masked man. "You knew this would happen." "I always knew." "Then why wait?" The stranger's answer came slowly. Because every map has only one author. The keeper unrolled another ancient scroll beside the first map. Unlike every other document Elias had seen, this one contained no words. Only circles. Hundreds of them. Some complete. Some broken. Some faded. What is this? The cycle. The history of every cartographer. The keeper pointed to the first circle. The first cartographer discovered that places are born twice. Twice. Once in stone. And once in memory. The second birth lasts longer. He moved to the second circle. When people stop speaking a place's name, the second birth begins to die. The third. When the final memory disappears, the place doesn't simply vanish. It is rewritten. Elias stared at the final empty circle. And this one? The keeper looked at him. It belongs to you. Another violent tremor shook the tower. The eastern district of Aurelia had almost completely faded now. Where elegant buildings had stood only minutes earlier, there was now empty sky. Not ruins. Not ashes. Nothing. As though those streets had never existed. Citizens walking through them simply vanished with them. No screams. No bodies. Only silence. The most terrifying silence Elias had ever heard. The masked man approached the great window. You still believe I'm your enemy? Aren't you? No. I am what remains when history finishes forgetting. He slowly removed the white mask. Elias instinctively looked away. Not because the face beneath was monstrous. Because his mind refused to focus on it. Every time he tried to remember the features, they slipped away. Eyes. Gone. Mouth. Gone. Hair. Gone. Even while looking directly at the man, his face could not be described. It existed beyond memory. Elias stumbled backward. What are you? The stranger answered softly. I no longer know. The keeper lowered his head. His true name was erased centuries ago. Without a name, the world cannot hold him. He survives only because the map remembers. The stranger picked up the pale blue lantern. I came today for one reason. He extended the lantern toward Elias. Extinguish this flame. What will happen? My watch will end. And yours will begin. Elias looked at the lantern. The blue flame seemed alive. Inside it, thousands of tiny voices whispered at once. Every forgotten language. Every forgotten song. Every forgotten promise. He reached toward it. His fingers stopped inches away. If I do this, I become you. The stranger nodded once. Yes. The keeper suddenly shouted. No. Both men turned. The old keeper had rushed to another window. Far beyond Aurelia. Beyond the white mist. Beyond the mountains. Something impossible was happening. The outside world was changing. Entire coastlines shimmered. Ancient roads appeared where none had existed. Ruined castles regained missing towers. Old forests spread across valleys. History itself was shifting. Elias whispered. The map. The keeper nodded grimly. It has begun rewriting both worlds. The stranger looked almost relieved. It has never happened this quickly. Then, something unexpected occurred. The first map itself changed. Words began appearing across the parchment. Not ancient words. Not Latin. Not Greek. English. Elias's own language. The ink wrote by itself. Asterisk, the cartographer may choose one truth. Asterisk. Only one. Nothing more. Nothing less. The keeper's eyes widened. I've never seen that. Neither have I, said the stranger. It is offering him a choice. Elias looked between them. What kind of truth? The keeper answered immediately. You could restore Aurelia. The stranger continued. You could erase it forever. The keeper added. You could preserve history. The stranger replied. Or change it. Elias looked back at the map. The silver ink waited. Ready. One sentence. One truth. Nothing more. Outside. The hall of names cracked down the middle. Thousands of engraved names began disappearing from its walls. One after another. The keeper rushed to the doorway. My name. He touched the stone. His own inscription had begun fading. He smiled sadly. It seems my time has come. He turned toward Elias for the last time. I have guarded memory for longer than kings have ruled. But remember this. He placed his trembling hand over Elias's heart. A map is never about places. It is about people. Draw the people correctly. And the world will eventually find its way. A deafening roar echoed through the city. The great bronze bell beneath Aurelia rang continuously. Not once. Not twice. Endlessly. The stranger closed his eyes. The boundary is breaking. The white mist surrounding Aurelia was disappearing. For the first time in 400 years. The hidden kingdom and the ordinary world were becoming one. And somewhere far away. In libraries across Europe. Forgotten pages were beginning to reappear on dusty shelves. Historians who had never heard the name Aurelia suddenly paused over old books. Wondering why they felt as though an entire chapter of history had always been missing. The bronze bell would not stop. Its sound rolled across Aurelia. Through the white mist. Across mountains. Across oceans. Into a world that had forgotten it for centuries. No one heard the bell with their ears. They heard it somewhere deeper. In dreams. In passing thoughts. In strange feelings they could not explain. In London, a librarian unlocked a cabinet that had not been opened for 50 years. Inside, between two ordinary books, rested a volume she had catalogued hundreds of times before. Except. She had never seen it. Its spine carried a title written in faded gold. The Roads of Aurelia. She blinked. Convinced she was imagining it. In Rome, an elderly priest paused while translating a medieval manuscript. A sentence that had always ended abruptly. Now continued for another 3 pages. The added text described ambassadors traveling to a prosperous kingdom called Aurelia. The handwriting matched the original perfectly. As though it had always been there. In Istanbul. A mapmaker opened a chest inherited from his grandfather. Hidden beneath old charts lay a sealed scroll. Across the wax seal was engraved a familiar symbol. The eye. Inside rested a map with one impossible detail. A kingdom that no one remembered drawing. Across Europe. History was changing. Not violently. Quietly. Like ink slowly soaking through paper. Inside Aurelia, Elias watched the first map rewrite itself. The silver lines spread farther every second. New villages appeared. New rivers. New names. It was no longer recording history. It was negotiating with it. The masked man stood beside him. This has never happened before. You said every cartographer faced this choice. They did. But none of them awakened both worlds. The keeper smiled faintly despite the chaos. Perhaps history has grown tired of forgetting. Then. A child's voice echoed through the tower. Master Keeper. A little girl no older than 8 stood in the doorway. She clutched a stuffed rabbit whose fabric had begun turning transparent. Everyone says the city is disappearing. She looked at Elias. Can you fix it? No one answered. Children have a way of asking the simplest questions. And exposing the hardest truths. Elias knelt before her. What is your name? She smiled. Mira. What does your father do? He makes clocks. And your mother? She plants apple trees. What do you want to be? She thought for a moment. A storyteller. Why? So no one gets forgotten. The keeper quietly turned away. Even the masked man lowered his head. Mira looked at the map. Is that our home? Yes. Then draw it. Such simple words. Such impossible weight. For the first time since arriving in Aurelia, Elias understood. The map had never needed a perfect cartographer. It needed someone who understood why places mattered. Not because of walls. Or kingdoms. Or kings. Because of ordinary people. People like Mira. He reached for his drafting pen. The same pen he had carried since leaving Bristol. Its tip trembled above the glowing parchment. The silver ink waited. One truth. One sentence. One decision. The masked man spoke softly. Choose carefully. The world will remember whatever you write. Elias closed his eyes. He remembered the fisherman in Bristol. The old professor. The goldsmith. The farmer who felt he had forgotten something. The bridge. The valley. The old woman. The captain. The keeper. Mira. He realized something astonishing. None of them had asked to become legends. They had simply lived. History had decided what to remember. He opened his eyes. Then, in careful handwriting, he wrote a single sentence across the first map. No place deserves immortality unless its people are remembered with it. The ink glowed brighter than the sun. For one endless moment. Nothing happened. Then the map accepted the words. The silver line spread across every corner of the parchment. The blue flame inside the lantern turned white. Outside. The disappearing building stopped fading. The Hall of Names sealed its own cracks. Trees returned. Bridges reformed. Children laughed again. The city breathed. But the miracle came with a price. The masked man staggered backward. His gray coat began dissolving into tiny fragments of light. The white mask slipped from his face and shattered before touching the floor. For the first time in centuries, a real face became visible. Not because Elias remembered it. Because the man had finally remembered himself. He smiled. It was an ordinary smile. Warm. Peaceful. Free. What is your name? Elias asked. The man looked toward the sky. For a long time. He searched his own memory. Then tears filled his eyes. A faint smile crossed his face. I remember. He whispered a single name. So quietly that only he could hear it. The sound disappeared into the wind. The name belonged to him alone. And perhaps that was how it had always been meant to be. A moment later, he became countless silver lights. They drifted upward into the bright morning sky. Gone. Not erased. Finally. Released. The keeper closed his eyes and whispered. The first cartographer has finished his final map. The city bells rang again. This time. Not as a warning. But as a celebration. The celebration lasted until sunset. Music returned to the streets. The fountains flowed once more. Children chased each other through the gardens as though fear had never visited the city. Yet Elias noticed something different. People had begun telling each other their names. Again and again. Parents introduced themselves to their own children before bedtime. Neighbors greeted one another with full names instead of familiar faces. Teachers began every lesson with the stories of ordinary citizens rather than the deeds of kings. Aurelia had learned something from nearly disappearing. Memory was not automatic. It was a choice people made every single day. That evening, the keeper invited Elias to the highest balcony of the Hall of Names. The sky above the city shimmered with thousands of silver lights. They looked like stars. But they were not. What are they? Elias asked. The keeper smiled. The memories that found their way home. For a long while, neither man spoke. The silence between them was comfortable. Finally, the keeper broke it. You changed the rule. I only wrote one sentence. Sometimes one sentence changes centuries. He handed Elias a small wooden box. Inside rested 3 objects. The brass compass. The mysterious silver coin. And the tiny notebook Elias had first seen in Professor Edmund Hale's study. The notebook that contained only one sentence. But now, when Elias opened it, the remaining pages were no longer blank. Hundreds of names filled them. Farmers. Masons. Teachers. Midwives. Carpenters. Children. People history had ignored. Each name was followed by a brief story. Not about battles. Not about politics. But about kindness. Courage. Sacrifice. Friendship. Love. Elias looked up. Who wrote these? The keeper answered. They wrote them. The old man walked toward one of the great windows overlooking Aurelia. For centuries, kings believed history belonged to them. They were mistaken. It belongs to everyone. The next morning, the white mist surrounding Aurelia had almost disappeared. Not entirely. Just enough for a narrow stone road to appear. A road leading back to the ordinary world. The keeper stood beside it. So. This is goodbye. Elias nodded. I suppose it is. You could stay. I know. You would never grow old here. I know. You would become the 48th keeper. Elias looked back at the city. Children laughed in the gardens. Merchants reopened their shops. Artists painted bridges that had almost vanished. Life had returned. It no longer needed saving. It simply needed living. He smiled. My place is out there. The keeper nodded with quiet pride. I hoped you would say that. Before Elias stepped onto the road, the keeper offered one final gift. A blank map. Unlike the first map. This one contained no glowing ink. No enchanted parchment. No hidden symbols. Only empty paper. Elias frowned. It's blank. Exactly. What am I supposed to draw? The keeper's answer was simple. The truth. Elias crossed the stone road. Halfway through the thinning mist, he turned around. Aurelia still stood behind him. Bright. Beautiful. Alive. The keeper raised one hand in farewell. Then the mist slowly closed again. Not to hide the city. Only to protect it. #####3 months later. Bristol. Autumn, 1709. Professor Edmund Hale looked up in disbelief as the door to his study opened. Elias. The old historian nearly dropped his glasses. I thought you were dead. So did I. They spoke for hours. Elias never told the entire story. Some truths were too large for words. Instead, he placed a single new map upon the professor's desk. It was the finest map he had ever drawn. Every river was accurate. Every village carefully marked. Every mountain measured perfectly. And near the northern valley, there was a small note. No kingdom. No grand city. No impossible claims. Only one sentence. Some roads lead to places that survive only because someone still remembers them. Professor Hale read it twice. Then smiled. I think. I understand. Perhaps he did. Perhaps he didn't. Some mysteries lose their power the moment they are fully explained. #### years passed. Elias never became wealthy. He never served a king. He never sought fame. Instead, he traveled from village to village, drawing maps no nobleman had requested. He recorded forgotten mills, lonely bridges, small schools, tiny orchards, family cemeteries, old wells, abandoned chapels. He believed every place deserved to be remembered. Not because it was important. Because someone had once called it home. People began calling him the people's cartographer. He never corrected them. #### the last journal. When Elias died peacefully many decades later, only one personal journal was found beside his bed. Its final page contained a single paragraph. Empires believe they live forever because they build monuments. They are wrong. A mother telling her child the name of a forgotten village preserves more history than the tallest palace. If the world remembers ordinary people, no kingdom is ever truly lost. Beneath those words, a small symbol had been drawn. An eye. With a six-pointed compass at its center. #### epilogue. Even today, some historians speak of unusual maps that appear in private collections. Maps with astonishing accuracy. Maps showing roads that official records cannot explain. Every so often, one bears a curious inscription in the corner. Not a signature. Not a date. Only a quiet reminder. Nothing truly disappears while someone remembers. And if, on a quiet evening, you ever find yourself walking an old forgotten road, you may notice a weathered milestone that seems older than the land around it. If you look closely, you might see a tiny carved eye, with a compass at its center. If you do, pause for a moment. Speak aloud the name of a place you never want the world to forget. Because somewhere beyond the morning mist, a cartographer may still be listening.